This is the TxT, and this is a fairly delayed episode of TxTs Treasury. Well, it's now the end of the year, and if I remember correctly, past me made some promises. Let's take a look. We can finally take a look into the crystal ball. In it, I can already see the next version, 0.10. It might be the biggest release yet, as it adds an entirely new tool, assets. In short, things are starting to heat up. I hope to have executed this plan by the end of the year. Well, at least I correctly predicted the whole biggest release yet thing. I'm not even done, and that's already true. It's actually so big, I might have gotten a bit burnt out along the way, but more about that later. Well, before I fail to predict the future again, let's take a look at my actual progress. First, we start with the usual. And here's now the promised little chart update. It's a new chart just titled Balance Over Time. And we have three axes here. So we have the earnings, so we can see our total earnings over time, our total spending over time, and then the net difference basically. Now the next step is to, not just accumulate those values indefinitely over the entire time span, but instead do it over like a monthly period or a quarterly or a yearly period, so you can better compare your earnings and spendings over different time periods. Now we see every month here with a dot, and all the spending and all the earnings and the net change is now accumulated for each month. Now I only have to do the same for every quarter or every year. And of course give the user some way to change between those scales. And with that, I would say that this chart is now pretty much finished as well. We can change between quarterly, yearly, and monthly. We can also just look at the last 365 days, and quarters or, years doesn't make much sense at that time range, of course. And with that, let's take a look at the actual meat of the update. All the important basic functionality for assets is now implemented, so we can now, for example, create a new asset. With some description. And we can give it an amount. We can actually also use decimals here. So this is, for example, useful for fractional shares in stocks. And we can give it a value. This works very similar to transactions. Currency, euro in this case. And we can also give it some tags. Let's give it a test tag, because that seems appropriate. And here's now our new asset. We're actually even calculating the total value here, which I should probably add some rounding to. This doesn't look quite right. For changes to the amount and the value, I'm actually keeping those as well. What this means is that I can now, at the next step, add nice charts to see changes to assets over time. Today I spent a little bit of time to, add assets to my transactions here. So as you can see, I have now a new transactions column, a new assets column in the transactions table. And if I click on a transaction, I can now choose an asset. Yeah, they have very much the same names right now, because I had a little bit of an oopsie when writing a SQL query. I didn't record that much of my progress, as you can see. I'm also not really sure if I want to keep doing that, because it can kind of interfere with actually writing the code sometimes. Anyways, let's take a look at the current state. This is the assets table. This contains all of your assets sorted by the total value. Yeah, you can also see the amount and the value per unit here, and some text and description and all that nonsense. Let's actually take a look at one of those assets here, and you can see some basic information. We can say we bought or sold something with creating a transaction, or we can also just directly modify the history without recording a transaction. We have some charts down here, total value over time. This is basically just the amount times the value calculated for every day. Same thing, value per single unit calculated for every day, and the amount over time for every day. Now let's just say we, for example, bought 5 pieces of this Apple Ink stock for, let's say, 95. We actually paid €1 in transaction fees, and we did so on, let's say, the 21st of December. And yeah, maybe let's just actually modify the total as well, because that's possible too. So let's do that and hit save, and then in theory this would update. I'm not sure why it's not doing that anymore, but let's just load it again. Alright, we can also do the same thing without logging a transaction. We can also just take a look at the raw asset history. We can of course also add a new transaction. This looks a lot simpler already. Yeah. Test with it's €1, and we can actually also give it a tag, for example this one, and once we hit save, all the other stuff comes in as well. As you can see, this looks quite complete on the whole data recording part of asset tracking. Now the small thing that is still missing is of course making all the nice charts on my dashboard represent assets as well. That can't be that hard, right? Right? And I know what you might be thinking right now. Yes, there's probably a library out there that would make my life a lot easier, but that's not the point. I really want to do as much as possible myself. My new goal is now to finish 0.10 sometime in January. I actually believe I could have finished in December, but there's been 2 new projects I spent quite a bit of time on. The first one was an advent calendar I did with a good friend of mine, in which we played a different old Minecraft version every day starting in alpha. The result is really fun and I had a blast recording it. You can find the playlist linked in the video description down below. The second project is still ongoing and also Minecraft related. I don't want to spoil too much yet, as it will result in a new video series on this channel. I will say this much though, it is programming related, but I'm not going to use Java. Well, I hope you could tolerate this short update video. The next video will come very soon, as I already hinted at. So I guess you should probably subscribe to not miss that. See you soon.